Hi, welcome to another episode of Heat Check. I'm John Devine. This is Anthony Chang. This hat, because I too want to go to Phoenix, so I figure I need to wear colors that are crazy enough that resembles the Phoenix Suns, and maybe this is the paper out in Phoenix. Heck with it. We don't
Is
need
South
this.
Florida is South Florida too
It's-
cold for you now?
Yes, South Florida is entirely too cold. There's snow in the state. That's too much. But
You need to get away from snow. More cactus.
and I really feel that's the reason Jimmy stayed, because it was too cold in Milwaukee right now. But we're going to get into all things Heat, which is at this point all things Jimmy, and talk to the person who's in the know. So, Anthony, you start off. Tell us what you know and give us the update since we spoke when we filmed Sunday night.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler is suspended again. As most of you know who are listening to this podcast already, suspended for 2 games. He's going to miss. We're recording this on Thursday late afternoon, so tonight's game against the Bucks in Milwaukee, and the Heat's game against the Nets in Brooklyn on Saturday. And he'll be eligible to return after the 2-game trip when the Heat hosts the Magic on Monday. Which, again, if he's still on the roster at that point and there's no trade, I believe as of now, I mean, things could change over the next few days. The expectation is, again, that he would rejoin the team and be available to play in games, as crazy as that might seem to some people. So, yeah, it's kind of where we are. Jimmy Butler, he missed the flight to Milwaukee yesterday afternoon, on Wednesday afternoon. He was planning to fly and join the team in Milwaukee on Wednesday night after missing the team's flight. The Heat basically said, don't bother. We're going to suspend you for 2 games, stay in Miami, where he's suspended without pay. He's losing another $700,000 in salary. The Heat is able to keep him away from the team, which at this point, it's never a good thing when your best player is away from the team. But at this point, considering everything that's going on, probably not a bad thing for the team that he's, not there, because it is a looming distraction, right now with him around, and the question of his effort, and is he really playing his style? He's not playing like full out Jimmy, obviously we know that, but how much effort is he giving? Is he helping? I mean, all those questions. I think just kind of getting him away for now and having the team on the road without that overshadowing everything is probably a good thing. We even saw on the West Coast, right, where they had a couple good wins without him. So yeah, I think this buys them more time. Not much time. It's only 2 games, but just buys them more time to see if they can find a trade. Not have that on the team in the locker room. But yeah, as far as the trade front, I don't know how much closer we are. I don't think we are any closer. As encouraging as it was as the Suns trading for those 3 picks, I think at the moment we all probably overreacted and said, "Oh, that means that Phoenix is in a trade for Jimmy. They're trading for 3 picks." I don't think the Heat are any closer to a trade than they were probably a week ago.
Now, let's catch up, people, because that happened since we filmed last. So, if I'm not mistaken, they traded 1 first-round pick for 3.
Correct.
Okay, and what that means, just for the complicated part of it, people can't trade back-to-back first-round picks back-to-back years, right? So you have to pick at least once every other year.
Yeah, so the point of that trade for Phoenix was, some people might be like, why would Utah want 1 first-round pick and they're giving up 3 first-round picks? That 1 pick from Phoenix is an unprotected pick. So it could be the number 1 pick, technically. It could be the last pick in the draft. But I think Utah's betting on Phoenix probably not being that good in 2031. That by then Kevin Durant will probably be gone. Who knows with Devin Booker. So they're betting on the Heat Suns, that pick being high, because the Suns might not be that good at that point. And for the Suns, you got 3 picks back. They're not great picks. They're least favorable of like 2 or 3 teams. The one in 2025 they get from Utah is probably end up being Cleveland's pick, which at this point I think would be 29 or 30. So it's not a great pick. All those picks are low in the first round, but it unlocks the ability. Before that trade, Phoenix had 1 tradable first round pick, which is that 2031 pick. Now they have 3 tradable first-round picks because they got that additional draft capital. Because, like you said, NBA rules say even if you have other picks, the Suns do have other picks, they couldn't trade them because you can't be without a first-round pick in consecutive years. So that is why the Heat also at this point only have 1 tradable, unprotected first-round pick, because they owe Oklahoma City a pick this 2025 which could end up being 2026 based on protections, and then the pick they gave up to Charlotte to get Terry Rozier, also tied up 27 and 28. So that leaves the Heat with 2030 and 2031 available, or 2030 or 2031 available, because you can't trade both because they're back-to-back years to trade. So the point of that trade for Phoenix was, again, to have more draft capital to include in a trade for Jimmy Butler or in some other trade they do. That was the whole point of it all. I think that, again, that's why when we saw that deal, we were like, oh, most of us were like, well, okay, maybe that means they know something. There's something lined up. They're close on a Jimmy Butler trade. But as of this morning, I can tell you a deal was not imminent. The Heat are obviously still trying to get a deal done before the February 6th trade deadline. But again, as of this morning, there was nothing close.
So, yes, I think when it happened, everybody went on red alert, like, oh, this is close, this is close, this is close. You have a couple things involved. We always talk about that second apron, which the bottom line means that you have to trade dollar for dollar, which is why they keep talking about trying to get a third or fourth team involved. The other thing is the person everyone's talking about mostly that matches up is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, just for the uninitiated, has a no-trade clause on top of that. So if the Heat doesn't want Bradley Beal here, okay, he would have to waive that no-trade clause and go someplace else. And then you still have to get everyone else involved to still make the numbers work. I think with each passing team, it's harder and harder to match those numbers up. So that's, it's not going to be an easy deal. It's not going to just be like, hey, here's Bradley Beal and a couple first-round picks that could be 28 and 30.
If it was an easy deal, it would have happened already, because I think the Heat would rather have this done, right? Jimmy Butler obviously wants to get out of here. But there's a reason why this is continuing to linger on, and really there's a real chance, even though I think both sides want to have a trade before the deadline, there's a real chance this could carry into the rest of the season. And then the offseason, we see if Jimmy Butler opts in or opts out. Again, I think both parties involved would not like that to be the case, but if there's no trade, you can't just magically make a deal happen. And to your point about Bradley Beal, yeah, the Heat and Suns could construct this beautiful 8-team trade that works for everybody. And then they go to Bradley Beal and say, Brad, would you waive your no trade clause? And he goes, no, I'm good. I want to stay in Phoenix. And that then all of a sudden can't happen. So he kind of holds the cards in all this. You're hearing his agent speak to other, ESPN, the paper out in Phoenix, about how Bradley Beal is focused on staying in Phoenix. He wants to stay there. Again, we'll see if that ends up being true, but it doesn't seem like, I think everyone assumed, Milwaukee, Bradley Beal in Milwaukee. Chris Haynes reported on Wednesday there is no connection between Milwaukee and Bradley Beal, and that is not going to happen. So then that scenario, if true, if that's out of the question, then what most people thought might happen here, with Middleton and Portis coming to the Heat and a couple picks and Beal going to Milwaukee, doesn't seem like that's likely. So this is a very, very complicated situation. Again, I think something being overlooked is, I'm not saying the NBA and the owners are to blame, because this is what they wanted, but before all these apron rules were in place, Phoenix could technically put it, combine salaries to make the money work. They could do Nurkic and Grayson Allen and another piece to add those salaries together to match Jimmy's contract. Now, because Phoenix is over the second apron, you can't combine salaries. It has to be a one-player trade, which is why it's either Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, or Bradley Beal. And they're not trading Kevin Durant, and they're not trading Devin Booker, so it has to be Bradley Beal. So these rules that were put in place a few years ago have really, really made this type of deal extremely difficult to execute. And then you throw in Beal's no trade clause, and it is, it's going to have to take the perfect deal for something to happen.
Okay, now I want to talk about, we'll talk about level of pettiness later on both sides. But the first thing, and let's just clear it up. So Jimmy missed the flight, got suspended. You hear some people talking about, that's kind of harsh on the Heat's part. Break it down. What usually happens to players when they miss the flight on the road trip?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know if it's happened since I've covered the team. I don't, look, sometimes there is a grace period of like, I'm on my way, please wait for me. I'm gonna be there in 5 minutes, and they'll wait. They don't usually the Heat. You can ask anybody around the team. They don't usually take off on time. They're scheduled for 3, and they end up taking off at 3:45. Well, that's because guys are just lingering in, or they're not in a huge rush to get to the city. They usually take off later than initially scheduled. I know they canceled practice that day and they pushed the flight up by like 15, 20 minutes. Not much. I know I was out there of like, oh, it was a timing issue. They made it earlier. There was a lot of communication involved with group texts, all that stuff of we're taking off at this time. Everyone else made the flight. I kind of think Jimmy, again, this is me speculating. This is not a report, aggregators. I kind of think Jimmy was planning. Like he probably knew he couldn't make the flight for whatever reason, and said, "I'll just meet you in Milwaukee. I'll see you guys tonight." And the Heat, maybe in the past, I don't, again, we know that Jimmy has flown private before, on his own. He's done that occasionally. That's been out there. Maybe before Jimmy would have gotten away with that, but things have changed. There's a lot. This situation is a lot different now than it was 2-3 years ago. So I think when Jimmy said, yeah, I'll meet you there, they're probably like, no, and again, I'm not saying the Heat are looking to suspend him. That wouldn't be fair. But at this point, you already suspended him once. Obviously, it's not a good situation with him around the team. It's kind of awkward. If you have a reason to suspend him, probably, other than Jimmy losing money, right? Jimmy's losing a lot of money when he's getting suspended. But probably Jimmy at this point, if he had his way, you think he wants to be in Milwaukee right now playing for the Heat, playing tonight for the Heat? I don't know, So, and I think the Heat are probably better off without Jimmy at this point just because of the distraction it's causing.
Well, you have the distraction level. Okay, it's let's be honest, it's a 2-game road trip. Okay, so 2 games.
It's quick.
Do you want to deal with all that on the road?
That's another
on
thing.
Top of dealing with the road trip itself and the weather and everything that goes along with it. So you're dealing with that for 2 days. And you said better off or not. Let's do it on an X's and O's standpoint. If you are preparing for life post Jimmy, which all indications are if they can find the right deal, they would. How much does it really, I know they're trying to thread the needle and still be competitive, but how much does it really, really, really hurt if you're trying to move on without him and you're trying to play? Because on the road, you tend to focus more because it's just you guys are in, you guys are together.
Yeah.
You're closing in, you're trying to focus, you've got everybody's attention. Okay, now you really got everyone's attention because, one, it's cold as anything. Nobody's going out and going anywhere. It's in the hotel. You're focusing here. The game tonight has been pushed back because of weather, for example. So if you're trying to get intense focus out of young kids, and then you've got a 35-year-old veteran who comes strolling in and says, all right, let's play, and I'm going to be on the court because I have to be. What?
Right.
But don't, do as I say, but don't do exactly as I do unless you're trying to get out of here.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I think that's the most difficult thing is you take out Jimmy and I guess Kevin Love, this is a really young team. And they're watching this. They're in the middle of this, this is something new to them, new to even probably guys like Bam and Tyler. But this is a young team that they're trying to develop and nurture and grow. And this is a ugly situation. So yeah, I think, I don't think it's a coincidence that the first suspension was 7 games, which took it through that West Coast trip, exactly through that West Coast trip. And then this one is 2 games, takes you through this little quick 2-game trip, and he returns when the team, comes back home. So I don't think that's a coincidence. I think you're exactly right, is on the road, the thinking is, look, it's a distraction, right? You go to New York now you play Brooklyn, reporters are going to be over there asking questions about Jimmy, trying to get Jimmy to talk. It's how that market is, JD. I think that this eliminates that for now. And again, I know Jimmy will probably fight the suspension. I don't know the precedent for suspending a guy multiple games for missing a flight. I don't know if that's happened before. This might be a first, which is why the Heat put out a statement that said, kind of added some other things. I'm trying to find the statement here. We have suspended Jimmy Butler for 2 games for continued pattern of disregard of team rules insubordinate conduct, and conduct detrimental to the team, including missing today's team flight to Milwaukee. So it's not just a missed flight; it's a bunch of other stuff. People can kind of take that for what for what it is. We don't know everything he's done. We know he wore Phoenix Suns shoes to the game. So just little things like that you just add them up, and I think missing the flight to Milwaukee was kind of, again, the last straw this time, where he got another suspension.
It's funny. So we're sitting in the world of analytics where everything is measured. And I was reading somewhere that they pretty much broke down his game since the suspension.
Right.
And that he has pretty much run at full speed, like less than anybody on the team.
Yeah, Bobby Marks did that on Second Spectrum from ESPN.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you could see it, right? And I honestly, to give Jimmy a little bit of credit, like, I thought the last game he played in the first half, he was fine. Like, he wasn't, playoff Jimmy, but he was okay. I thought he was a little more engaged. He was calling for the ball. He had 6 assists, I think, in the first half. But then he kind of faded as the game went on. The second half wasn't great. He didn't play in the fourth quarter. But yeah, you look over the 3 games, I think he has 39 points total. Like, he hasn't taken many shots. He's getting off the ball a lot. He's just, again, it's a guy that he doesn't want to be here. So what do we expect? It's almost like everyone's micro-analyzing like every little thing Jimmy does. It doesn't surprise me. Like, he doesn't want to be here. What do we expect? He's made it clear he doesn't want to play for this team. Do you expect him to score 40? Do you expect him to put his body out there and draw 15 free throws like classic Jimmy Butler? Like, that's not going to happen. People have taken pictures of him on the bench.
Any free throws?
He's had like 2, I think, each game, something like that. But it's just this doesn't surprise me. This shouldn't come as a shock. He's out there literally so he doesn't get suspended and he still gets paid. He does not want to play for this team anymore. So again, I think that's one of the reasons why, like, if you can keep him away from the team, it's probably good for the team as a whole, because why would you want that, right? As the Heat. So it's a really weird situation. I think weird is like the most common word I've seen used to describe it. Weird, awkward, ugly, like messy. And again, I don't know what the resolution is at this point. It feels like we're going in circles where it's like, okay, let's say there's no trade. He comes back Monday. Is he gonna get suspended again because he misses a shoot around? Like, and then he's gonna go out there and score 12 points on 6 shots and not play in the fourth quarter? Like, what is the end game here if there's no trade?
Well, I think, and you're a parent as well. I think it's one of those things when your kids cut up, that each time they cut up, your level of tolerance gets lower and lower. And I don't know if anybody, I mean, we call him the Godfather anyway. And clearly, his patience is wearing thin. And you have to remember, you're trying to move on. We talked about it before. You're trying to show your other kids, look, I draw a line in the sand. This is what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. Now, in this case, from other reports, he had been doing things that no one had gotten away with in Heat culture, including LeBron. And then, now he's getting away with it. And now all of a sudden you're tightening the reins on it. But you have a whole bunch of young kids watching too. And the other thing about Jimmy is that we're talking about effort and everything. There's one other thing that looms out there, and that's the fact that, God forbid, this guy gets hurt.
Yeah.
And screws up everything for Jimmy, for this team, and for the trade market. So, we do rip him a new one and say, you're not playing hard. But we also don't want, we want him to play hard, but do we want him to get hurt? So what do? The only thing is, if you sit him, the Heat's culture is like, I'm not sitting him and paying him. And if I remember correctly, the way the suspension works, they appeal it. It pretty much sits in the equivalent of escrow until it's finally decided, and then they parcel it out accordingly. Like, you go through appeals, and then when the appeal is gone through and it's done, and once they make a final decision, like, I think he's missing $700,000 for these games. So that's put aside, and then they rule on it. And if they say, hey, then he gets that back. If not, then it goes to wherever the charities are.
Yeah, it's held in an escrow. And right now, I think his lost salary is up to $3.1 million between the entire 9 games. My question to you, JD, and like, I think this is like the big question here. If there's no trade, and I get both sides of this question, but I want to see what you think. If he's still on the roster on Monday, would you bring him back again? Do you think it's worth continuing to have this philosophy of we will not pay a guy to stay away? We're not going to pay someone $500,000 a game to just be in Miami Beach playing dominoes. Like, we're not going to do that. We're going to make him come to work and play. Or do you think that at a certain point you have to say, this is just not good for the team. It's not healthy for the locker room. Until there's a trade, we gotta come to some type of agreement where he just stays away from the team.
My gut says it's not good for the team. Just keep him away. I understand it's like anti everything they believe in. But like I said, you have a young team. You do not want this young team infected by that attitude and thinking, okay, when the time comes up, we can cut up and this is, it'll be fine. The Heat prides itself on being different from how other franchises are run for the most part. It prides itself on Heat culture. And this is about as opposite as that culture as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Pat Riley's taking some hits. Pat Riley doesn't care if he takes hits. And that's great. I understand. Pat Riley's goal is to bring another championship down here. They can shoot Warner cannons on Biscayne Boulevard and all that good stuff. But his goal is what's going to make this team better. It looks like he is learning a little bit. As you know, 10, 15 years ago, he was like, I don't need these draft picks. Who cares? Now you look at this team, it's made up a lot of draft picks that are in the middle of the first round that aren't usually, that's a crapshoot on whether they're going to be successful. It's not like he's had top 5 picks and, Tyler Hero was a top 5, top 10 pick, or Bam was a top 5.
Right.
Even Khalil Ware right now is not a top 5. Now, I was listening to one of those sports radio stations and they were saying that like 3 days ago, Khalil Ware was 5,500 to 1 to win Rookie of the Year. Now he's 500 to 1. This is still a pick that was in the middle of the first round. So he clearly, talent evaluation, they're good at. If they're going to do something, you get picks, and we're saying, oh no, they're going to get a middle of the first round pick. What have they turned those first round picks into? It's like the Dolphins, for example, we go, oh, the Dolphins have draft picks. They're going to draft an offensive lineman. We have no faith in the Dolphins drafting an offensive lineman because they don't do it. But here, if you told me the Heat has a 15 pick, a 12 pick, a 17 pick, I go, you may get someone in the rotation.
Yeah, they're at least probably going to find a rotation player, right? Whether it's off the bench or a starter. Yes, and I think that has to be a big part of any potential Jimmy Butler trade is getting picks because, again, they've been good at drafting guys. They've hit on, again, the only mistake I think they've had is passing on Tyrese Maxey to get Precious Achiuwa, which Precious Achiuwa, I think it was number 20 or something around there in that first round, still an NBA rotation player. So it's not like they totally whiffed on that. And they say what you want about Kyle Lowry. They used Precious Achiuwa as part of that deal to get Kyle Lowry, which was a big deal back then. So there was some value there. Of course, it's not Tyrese Maxey. That would have been a lot better to take Tyrese Maxey at that point. But the point is, like, for the most part, they've really hit on their picks between Jaime and Nico, Bam, Tyler, Khalil Ware, Pella Larson, second rounds. Probably, whether it's now or after Jimmy's trade, he's going to be in the rotation. And then also, even if you don't use the picks are extremely valuable in trading for stars now. Now, if a star asks to go to the Heat and wants to go to the Heat, now if the Heat can get 2 or 3 other picks, all of a sudden they have 3 or 4 picks they can include in a trade for a star. So draft picks have never been more important because of the new CBA and the way roster construction is now in the league. Draft picks are extremely important, so I think that has to be at the center of any return the Heat get for Jimmy Butler.
So my last question for you, since we already did an earlier one this week, and I don't want to overload these people, not everyone has some people have ADHD. So when the smoke clears, whatever happens, at some point Jimmy is gone. How much does this hurt Pat Riley and his ability to go whale hunting in the future? Because we haven't landed we landed Jimmy, but we haven't landed a whale here in a while.
I don't think it does, and I really don't, because I think people are, like Dwayne Wade said, I'm not trying to copy Dwayne Wade's point, but I think Miami is still a very attractive market to play in, to be a millionaire in. And the Heat are they're still known as one of the most stable, as crazy as it sounds right now because of what's going on, is one of the most stable, successful organizations in modern NBA history. They just are. I don't think there's gonna like ruin as while, it might be a hit on Pat Riley's kind of reputation around the league right now to the modern NBA player. I still think he's gonna be really highly regarded. It's Pat Riley, right? I don't think this is gonna completely ruin it. And I also think like the thinking of, the Heat hasn't gotten a star in a long time. The way you get a star now is very different. And they've tried to get a star. Stars have wanted to come here. Again, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal before he went to Phoenix. Like that was always that of, will Bradley Beal come to the Heat? They wanted to get those players. Those players wanted to come to the Heat. The Heat were on their short list, but they just didn't have the assets to get it done. It wasn't because, I don't want to go play for the Heat. I don't want to go play for Pat Riley. It was because the Heat just didn't have enough to get those trades done. Back in the day, you could just carve out cap space and do it that way. But now stars aren't hitting free agency. It's because there's so much incentive now built in to keep stars in their markets that there's an incentive to sign an extension with those teams because they could get more money, more years on that extension if they sign with their current team, and then they ask for the trade. Once they sign that contract, then they ask for the trade. But in order to acquire that player, you have to have draft capital. You have to have valuable players that young players that some team would like, and the Heat just haven't had enough of that lately. I think that's why there's been a little bit of a cold streak of landing a star. But if they could recoup some of those assets in a trade of Jimmy, then all of a sudden you're in the game again. So I really don't think that's going to be an issue. Maybe some people do, but I think once this passes and the Heat can kind of again stock up again and draft capital and other stuff, and maybe some other cap flexibility, I think they'll continue to be in the game for stars who become available in the trade market.
Well, the Heat continues to find itself near the center of the NBA world, whether it's on court or craziness like this. So we are going to wrap this up for now, but realize we may have to come back in another couple days because who knows what the heck's going to happen. We hope to see what happens Monday when Orlando Magic comes to town.
A Saturday episode of the Heat Check? What do you think, JD? Sunday episode?
We may have to do one Monday when they say, you know what? He's suspended for the whole home stand too. Yeah. But as these things continue to evolve, follow us on MiamiHerald.com. Follow us on X. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on social media. We will be there to report. Barry Jackson is up there on the road trip now. He will be reporting there as soon or as late as this happens. But we know it's never going to be a dull moment, no matter how petty, between shoes, between, visits, where else, between missed flights, we expect to be there. So for John Devine and Anthony Chang, we'd like to thank you for joining us on Heat Check, and we'll see you next time.